All right, folks. So I think we'll go right in and kind of just give me one sec. Fix my screen a bit. Right. Okay. Who is Arun? Right. I think Harleen did give introduction, but so as she said, I've worked. I've been fortunate enough to work in multiple organizations, building products, and I was self-taught product manager. I started as an engineer and kind of moved into product leadership roles. And my last role was with Google, where I was leading the next billion users ads business for them. Right. So most of the talk today will be based on my personal experience and what I've observed and experienced in my career versus what you'll find in a lot of books, right? So I think it's more real life to say in the simple words than what you would see. So just one caveat is most of my experience has been with software products, and product management can work across multiple industries, and so it's more going to be relevant or more useful for easier to kind of go over with for folks in those industries versus, let's say, a hardware industry or something different where it may be slightly different, right? So I'll just put that caveat in place, right? So yeah, let's go. So what we're going to cover today, right? I kind of picked out 4 things that I want to cover today. And they will not be sequential, right? So I think we'll start with roles and responsibilities of a PM. So what kind of things that a typical PM may do on a regular basis, right? Then the second part would be what key skills and competencies help you become a good PM, right? And if you excel in those, then you become a better PM, right? It's like any other job function, right? Couple of things across the presentation that I'll try to cover. One is pitfalls to watch out for, right? And something to watch out for and pay focus and how do you navigate complexity as you go along doing that function, right? So I think this will not the last 2 things will be covered throughout the presentation, kind of interspersed. So that's kind of the plan for today. So it's typically question asked is what's a PM, who is a PM, right? And you'll commonly hear a couple of terms saying a PM is a CEO of a product or a general manager of a product. I feel like those are like very broad terms and can mean a lot of different things. My personal definition that I think of it is a product manager is a cross-functional owner directly responsible for the success of a product. So there are a lot of people who work towards the product, but the PM is like the one single person who's responsible, right, across those functions for the success of a product, right? So that's kind of the definition that I believe is makes more sense. But yeah, you'll hear a lot of variations of this in different context. So I want to cover what are the key responsibilities and there's a star because it doesn't cover everything, but I try to cover some of the core responsibilities of a PM, right? And things that you may do in this role, across the product life cycle, right? So definitely not a comprehensive list, and we're not going to try to cover everything that you may do or may not do, but I think let's cover the major themes, right? So one is product strategy and vision, roadmap and prioritization, and execution and problem solving. And going across all of those is communication. These are not sequential by any means of imagination. I think they all happen together. They may, because we do iterative development and product life cycle. So a lot of these may happen in parallel or overlapping in some ways. But if you think about it, if you extract out the key things that are activities or functions or roles that you may do in this product management would be I would like to classify them as these 4. So product strategy and vision, roadmap and prioritization, execution, problem solving, and communication. Some of the things that you may do will depend on your specific role and specific organization, Some people may more spend in one of those or more of those, and but it'll become clearer as kind of we go through the a little more of the content. I think I always find this part the most intriguing, which is product strategy and vision. It tries to answer why should you build a product, right? So it's more this is a phase where you ask a lot of questions to yourself, to your stakeholders, to everybody, right? And try to answer those questions. Why should you build the product? I think that's the key thing. What's in it to build the product? It kind of defines the rest of the life cycle, because this is what you would do throughout the product life cycle. So this phase, kind of from that perspective, is very crucial. Of course, there is a lot of teams involved in this. I know you may have other functions like sales or business operations, engineering, design, that you work with, but I think in the end it comes down to the product management function to define the product strategy and vision, right? So this is kind of a defining factor for rest of the product. And I try to see what kind of questions you're going to ask, right? Or you have to answer in some ways. Like, who's your customer? So you've got to identify, what is the set of customers that you want to target. A clear articulation of that customer segment is very important. What are their needs? What needs are there, or what gaps are there, and what is those needs or problems that you can solve, right? And that has to align with the company's or the organization's core competency, right? So if I am, let's say, an e-commerce player, an e-commerce business, and I'm trying to solve for certain set of customers. Now they may have a needs in terms of either banking needs, right? That is unmet, but that is not the company's core competency. So that doesn't help. So you have to identify the customer need and make sure that or find those needs that align with the core competencies of the company, or the strength of the company, right? And what you want. Now, if you get this customer identification and their need wrong, you'll definitely build a wrong product. Right. So I think this is one where make sure you kind of sound out everybody, and have very clear articulation and validation that this is the set of customers and the need and their problems that you're going to solve. Right. Then the other part is like, are there other products in the market? Right. What is the competition doing? Right. I think that's an important kind of outside-in perspective. Are there other players? Is there a place for you to fit in? How are you going to position your product vis-a-vis the competition in the market? How would you differentiate the product, right? So I think asking those hard questions, answering those hard questions is very important in this phase. And I think I feel like the most important question is, okay, so you've identified a customer need, you've identified a product positioning. The second thing is, or thing you should also try to figure out is, can you make a viable business out of it, right? Is like, it may not happen in short term, but you have to be very clear that, yes, we can make a viable business out of it, that we can achieve business success from building the product. So you have to align the business goals to the product that you are envisioning. Right. And there is a clear path to success, that if you build the product right, if you get right adoption, yes, these are the business metrics or success metrics, that we can do. The other part you have to define in this is what is success, right? And we just talked about like aligning to business goals, but what metrics will you define to use the success? And clear articulation of that success metrics is critical, because that's how you will measure whether you succeed or not, right? And I think a clear articulation and clear definition of those metrics is something that a good PM will do in this. I think this becomes tricky. In some cases it's very obvious, some cases it's not very obvious. People look at, you can get too ambitious and say everything will become, go as per the plan. And so that's why calling out this risks and what can go wrong, and in terms of trying to achieve is a balanced view of building a product vision and strategy. And then the other part you should typically is done is that you would define key themes on how would you build the product, right? What are the key high level capabilities that will help you achieve that vision. So I think that part is as important, and in kind of a matrix of all of those things will make up a good strategy or a product vision and strategy. Now, depending on who you talk to, there will be a couple of other activities that you may hear that kind of, I would say, fall into this bucket, right? And some of the terms you may hear, brainstorming, ideation, financial model pricing. A financial modeling is, for example, figured out what could be the lifetime value of a customer, right? So what would be the financial model to kind of do that? What should, if it's like, say, a B2B kind of a product, then or a SaaS kind of product, then what would be the pricing model? Maybe figuring those out. Some places you might end up building even small prototypes, right? For in this phase itself to get some idea of what the product may look like. So not very common, but yeah, I mean, it may competitive analysis, right? So you may do it yourself, you may hire a third-party company, but a competitive analysis is important, especially if it's a crowded market, there are other players. Customer research, right? So either a one-on-one, through panels, through focus groups, getting those inputs, into your thing is very important to understand the customer. And as a PM, I think this is one thing that a good skill and a good competency, and how to do the customer research, how to extract the information, how to apply that to your product thinking is again can differentiate an average PM from a good PM, right? So I think that's kind of important. And I think you'll hear times, customer centricity, and all of that, and I just put that into the customer research kind of bucket. Right. Okay. So the next phase, or the next, I won't call it a phase, but next group of things that a PM will do is around roadmap and prioritization, right? And that's basically taking the product vision and strategy and converting it into something that you can build on, right? So that's like your vision and a long-term 3 to 5 year view. Now you take that and see how we're going to execute and how we're going to build, right? So and again, product manager owns the product roadmap, right? So I think this is again a key exercise that you'll end up spending a lot of time on. What kind of activities? Again, this is very core to a PM function. And I'm used some terminologies and some things, and that may vary from organization or the type of industry, but core of it remains the same. Writing product specs, right? And this is probably again what makes a good PM and how good you are at writing product specs, right? Crisp articulation, and which conveys the message that you need to, right? So writing product specifications, and PRDs has been the traditional way. Some people write epics and stories, but the concept is the same, right? What you need to build. Road mapping sessions, right? So taking that and having discussions with design and with stakeholders and sales and engineering, and doing those road mapping sessions and being able to take those multiple inputs and put that into your roadmap, right? And iterate over the roadmap is again a complex activity that you need to learn. And I guess the main thing around most organizations or most things is there are constraints, right? So we don't live in a theoretical world where whatever we decide we can build. There are now, first you start with okay, these are the things I want to build. and then you apply the boundaries and the constraints, right? So constraints can be resources, it can be infrastructure, it can be dependencies with other teams, it can be timelines. So you got to take the theoretical, like what you want to build as a PM, and then apply the constraints to to see what can actually be done, right? And that also involves trade-offs, right? And again, I feel like this is what differentiates a good PM from an average PM. And if you want to be a good PM, successful PM, get very good at trade-offs, right? And how to do trade-offs, how to convince people for trade-offs. I have 100 sort of features, but I have to trade off, right? And I have to build only 10. Now, which 10 should I build, right? And being able to decide that in a structural way and that aligns most people is a tough skill, but I think you got to work hard at it. So taking those features and doing a comparison of the impact versus the work needed, and and seeing, okay, what we should do now, what we should do later or not do, right? I think that's probably, I feel like, the hardest thing I do as a product manager is doing the trade-offs, because I want to do everything, but I can't do everything. So doing making those hard choices is the kind of a tough skill, but yeah, I think got to build that one. Okay, the last or the next thing I want to cover is execution and problem solving. And I've put a very simple definition. I don't know if it covers everything, but it's like working with dev or engineering and to achieve goals on time, right? It's like a very simplistic kind of a caption or a title for this particular activity. So did all the planning and road mapping, but if you're not able to actually do those things, then it doesn't matter, right? So being able to successfully execute is where the rubber meets the road, right? And typically there are timelines. You got to be able to timelines, manage the resourcing and see where we need more resources, less resources. And I guess the most trick part is you will face obstacles, you will face problems, and how do you work around them? How do you solve them, right? Along with other people will define the success in some ways, right? So some of the things I think about, right, that I feel are important or define between a good or an average PM to a good PM is most of the time you have to justify, right? Justify for resources. You're just you need more, and resourcing mean not just engineering or dev resources, but it could be infrastructure, it could be time, it could be attention from other groups, right? And you got to be able to justify why what you need is more important than anything else, right? I think that's kind of an important thing, and being able to make a case with data is very important. Cross prioritization. In most large organizations, you're not building everything by yourself, right? There are other teams who are building certain things. You have dependencies on them, and being able to cross prioritize and work with other teams to kind of make the cases is something that is helps drive success, right? Saying no. As a PM, in most cases, you will get more requests than you can handle, right? That's a fact in most cases. And being able to push back in a very professional way is a good skill, right? Pushing back, because otherwise you'll get distracted. The teams will get distracted if you let other people drive the agenda, right? And I think how do you remove features? I think it's very easy as a PM to add a long set of features, right? I feel like all PMs are good at it. What they're not good at is to figure out which one they should remove, right? And I think again, that will determine if you have a good intuition around what you should not do, as much as what you should do will be a good skill to build in this thing. Ask questions, right? And okay, so the most common questions I get is, okay, I'm a PM, I don't know engineering is giving me some very detailed technical answer, and I cannot parse out of it, right? So being able to ask those simple questions: why is it taking this long, right? And can it be done in less time, or can we do it in a limited scope, right? And asking those questions will will help you succeed, right? And again, this is again a trick part. Just practice and get better at it, I guess, is my only suggestion there. Okay, I think this is the another skill, communication. Of course, this goes in all phases. It's not, there's not a specific phase, but this also kind of differentiates a good PM from an, a average PM. Most good PMs are very good communicators. So what do you mean by communication, right? It's being able to communicate the vision, right? You got to convince. See, again, most organizations, most groups, you're fighting for attention and resources, right? And whether you succeed or not to get that investment, to get the resources, to get the attention, will depend on how do you communicate your vision, right? How strongly, how passionately, how accurately. So why of the product, both up to the leaders as well as to your teams, right? It's very important to be able to do that in a very crisp manner. Why are we building this product? Why this is important to build? How do you communicate the progress and obstacles, right? And prioritization. Now you pick one or the other, right? But constantly you'll be asked to justify why you picked one over the other, and having a very systemic way of justifying why you did one over the other, and you have to be clear in your mind to be able to communicate, right? So I think this is again thing, be very crisp about why you picked one over the other, right? Product specs we talked about. It's very important to build very clear product specs, or write product specs and what to build. If you write too much fluff, it's a mess. It'll waste a lot of time. If you write less, then you'll miss out on certain things. So I think the right level of product specs is so I would say all of these articulation of some of those things, both verbal and written, is very important. Okay. I think we are running pretty fast, but that's good. I think we might get more time for questions. I think I'll next thing I'll talk about is competencies. I think some of these we did talk about in some of the previous points, but I tried to articulate the competencies independently as well. And typically these will be the ones in many of these. This is how you will be assessed as a PM. When you want to go an interview, or when you want to do your reviews. So I think it's very good to understand what's where the gaps are for you, and where you should invest as a PM, right? Into building your own competencies, right? So I think that was kind of my thought around going around these competencies. It's nothing new. I think you'll find some of these everywhere in many of the literature as well as discussions, but I think it's good to see where you are and what is important and what is not. So I think I tried to list like 5 competencies. Again, it's not a it's not a comprehensive list, but the other field things I think which if you try to focus on building those competencies, you'll end up succeeding as a PM, right? So one is product thinking, storytelling and communication. The next one is metrics and data, strategic thinking, and being able to do trade-offs and prioritization. I think the product thinking is of course very core to being a PM. If you are interviewing for a PM, a lot of the interview will focus on this competency actually, right? So I know this is probably bread and butter for a PM, but it's good to build this, doing some case studies, practicing with people, and also doing it as part of your roles, right? So I would say, like, what are the key parts of building this competency, in practice? One is, understand the customer, right? What does that mean? Like, who is your customer? We talked about during the product strategy, but I think, even if you're not involved in product strategy, to understand who is the customer that you're building for, what are their needs, right? So one of the things that, common mistake that, we all make in our roles, especially if you work, let's say, you're serving the Indian customer, right, in the Indian market, is to think of yourself as the customer. Oh, I would not do this, or I would buy this. But you're not we are not the typical customer that you're going after as a PM, right? So I think you have to remove your personal, viewpoints, right, and look from a viewpoint of a customer. And going and talking to, some of the customers, spending time with customers, is or one thing I found useful, in a B2B environment, is actually sit on some support calls, right? It's a very humbling and unique experience in listening to the problems that the customers have with the product, right? So I think you have to make a lot of effort. It's very easy in most organizations to just read some documents and build something and say, okay, I understand the customer. I feel like that's a mistake, right? You can survive, right? You may be able to manage and second, third hand information, but there is nothing like first hand information about a customer, right? So I would say that, and sometimes the companies and the groups make it very difficult for, even product managers to talk to customers. Not all, but many of them. I think you have to fight that. I think you have to find ways to talk to customers and get right information. Now there is a other side to it, right? Let's say you're building a large consumer product for millions of customers. Now you talk to 10 customers. Is that really representative? Correct. So I think the other mistake or thing I've seen is to get too much influenced by some of the people that you listen to, and it maybe have a very biased information, right? So being able to parse that input into right level of actionable task is also a little bit tricky, but it's important. The other common thing I feel like which happens again, maybe in a more B2B environment, is okay, you go talk to customers, okay, saying, okay, what's working, what's not working. You will end up a lot of times focusing on the problems that are there in the current thing, right? Versus, okay, you want to build something new, and most users in a B2B, right, environment will focus on, like, okay, this screen is not working or my task is not getting done, right? But you're trying to build a larger set of things, right? So while you have to take those inputs, don't let that by itself drive drive the your roadmap, right? I think this should be one input, but not the sole input, right? So don't like overdo it and get into just that, and focus on what other inputs are there for you to build a roadmap, right? So I think this like, and whenever you write any product spec, right, just you should clearly identify what the customer is and what customer problem you like to solve, right? So I've in my career I sit in a lot of product reviews, right? And whenever I sit in product review and somebody presents something, that's my first question is, okay, who's your customer and what problem are you trying to solve, right? What will you help the customer do? And if you can't clearly articulate that, I say, okay, do not do anything else, right? You stop there, because then you're building something wrong, correct? So if you don't have a very clear thought on who's the customer, what problem you're trying to solve, what will you get out of it, you are doing something for doing sake versus really solving as a PM, right? So So keep that in mind, and try to, get those inputs and see how to parse those inputs and build that into your roadmap, right? Second thing is, I think, which is probably a more like a learned skill is intuition, right? And building intuition on, okay, now you have a problem, but what will work for the customer? What won't work for the customer, right? I think this is again a important thing, right? You just cannot, I mentioned that earlier, you cannot just, take something, straightforward, right? So a lot of times in my career, I've got input saying, oh, we should build this app, right? But or I should build this capability, it'll work. That's just the ask from the customer, but they're not really, you have to think through it, whether if you just do it, whether it will solve the problem or not, right? I think that a lot of times, we get it wrong, and it's okay to get it wrong, but I think that's where the competency comes in, right? Is to be able to figure out that what is the solution, the right solution to solve that problem. Will it really solve the problem, or will it just create more problems, or not? It's not addressing the right problem statement. So I think that part is also, we call it product intuition, product thinking, but I think this is again a good thing to focus on, right? And be aware of that. These things can go wrong, but you got to focus and pay attention and make it right. The last part I wanted to cover, and product thinking is a complex topic, right? So I'm not trying to kind of go over everything that you may do in a product thinking or what skills you need, but just some of the key things that I feel are important and differentiate, right? And good PMs do it well versus not, right? Understanding of the market and industry dynamics, right? So which is, attending industry events, understanding, reading a lot about competition, reading documents and papers and talking to people, seeing demos, creating accounts in all systems, and basically doing that, right? So to understand what is the market, what is competition doing, how is that industry moving, not just competition, right? And how is that kind of an area evolving, what are the regulatory things happening in the thing, what are the privacy things coming along, right? Now, if you work in the Indian market, you may focus on the Indian market, right? But you can also, for example, see what's happening in a China market or a US market, right? Which are maybe a little more advanced than India, or earlier in the, advanced in the cycle, right? And see the trends and see, do they apply here? Can those things happen here, right? So that's an example. And nowadays, in many industries, regulatory and privacy things, what is happening, what is coming up, right? And what's, and how they may influence your product, your offerings, is being aware of it and being proactive about it is help, right? How is the competition moving, right? And what are they thinking? What are their thoughts on where that is going? How do the customers perceive the competition versus your offering and your product, right? And so I think what's all of those kind of external outside in view is as important as talking to customers and seeing what is happening, right? So I think having those customer view, your product intuition, understanding of the market, that will combine, give you the the right set of skills and strengths to build this product thinking competency. Okay. Again, this is a pretty wide topic, just metrics and data. And this more and more actually, from my experience working maybe 20 years ago, the time we spent on this was very minuscule compared to what we do now, right? I think that's kind of been the evolution of product management, right? It has become much more data driven and data oriented, right? So I think as PMs is again, I feel like a lot of PMs are not good at this skill, is especially in the early career. So it's very important to build this, and I'll go over some of the kind of caveats and thoughts like that you should do, right? So very important to be very clear what's your North Star metric. There's a lot of literature, a lot of these things around that, right? So usually it's pretty straightforward. Okay, this is your North Star metric, right? But make sure you're aware that there is counter metrics, right? So one of the common things I have seen is that you try to optimize for North Star metric, right? Now, for example, right, let's say you have an online product, and you're trying to get more and more customers to sign up, right? And let's say your e-commerce thing, right? So you eventually want people to buy, right? Which is a conversion, but you're trying to get more people to kind of sign up, right? So you spend a lot of marketing dollars you can spend and try to get customers to sign up on your app, or download an app or sign up on the website, right? Now maybe that's your thing, but is that converting? People are not buying because you're getting the wrong set of customers, right? So your really counter metric is your conversion, right? So which tells you that just optimizing for North Star is not the right thing, right? Because you're not getting the right value out of that customer. So I think understanding of what the North Star metric is, what could be the counter metric, right? Which gives you the sanity. Now you may still optimize for North Star, but that keeps your thing in like a sanity check on your growth is your counter metrics, right? So having a clear understanding of what is North Star, what is your counter metric is very important. Many products, A/B experimentation is the bread and butter, like the work that I have done always, right? So in e-commerce, in ads, in everything online, everything we go through A/B experiments, right? And learning how to do it, how do they run, how to interpret data from A/B metrics, right? Is very important, right? And especially in the industries where this is very common. So maybe in a B2B SaaS kind of things, it may not be that common, but especially in the consumer internet space, this is like the bread and butter, right? We live and die by A/B experimentation, right? So what are experimental holds? What does traffic do? What does mean to take traffic from 1 to 5% to 10%, let's say? How do metrics change between them? How to read and interpret those metrics, right? So I think this is a tricky skill. It takes time and learning, but again, this now, and more this is going to be very important, right? It is very important already in many industries, but I think just have to go and learn this skill, especially in those industries. Interplay of various metrics, right? So typically your product, your business will have multiple metrics. Now, how does metric A, interplay with metric B, right? If metric A is increasing, does metric B decrease? If they are both increasing, why is that? In what cases? So, if it goes beyond certain number, then this other metric starts changing, right? So I think understandings of those metrics and how they may interplay with one another, how movement of one may impact the other, and is kind of very important for a good PM to know, right? So understanding the interplay of various metrics. And again, the thing is that in many places, a pitfall that I have seen is that there will be a data analytics team, right, who may do many of that work. But a PM doesn't need to do that work, but they need to understand why things move, right? And because that has an impact on the product. So if you while you may rely on other people to do some of that analysis, but to understand the metric and the movement and why certain things may happen is again will differentiate a good PM from an average PM, right? So again, this is what been my observation looking at a lot of PMs. Again, this is another skill I feel like good PMs will have, is extract data and analyze, right? Now, again, many organizations or groups may have dedicated data and analytics team, right? Which may run the reports or build dashboards and all of that. But they will only build standard stuff, right? So as a PM, I think if you're able to do some of the analysis yourself and do extract that data when needed, right? is write some basic queries, understand, talk to some other guys, engineers or data analysts, and learn some of that skill, and become self-dependent, right? I think it'll go a long way. To fast track some of the things you want to do, so do some of the ad hoc analysis. So I think just when you get an opportunity, do build this skill, and don't shy away from it, right? I feel like many PMs, just because say, okay, I'm not technical, I'm going to shy away from it. I don't think you need to become technical, or you need to become a data analyst, but learn that skill to do actually basic stuff on your own, right? And learn metrics and how they change, how do you accumulate metrics, and it's a good what is significant movement, what is not significant movement. Read up some statistics, fundamentals to build. I think this will be another very good skill. If you can excel in that, if you can get better at it, I think it'll help build your career overall, right? And again, this wasn't that important, that critical. Maybe when I started my career, this particular competency was not that important. But now I think it's changed, right? I think now it's like the bread and butter for most type of industries or most type of products. So how to move certain metric, right? So a little bit related to what I was covering earlier. And when I move, so let's say, conversion, right? E-commerce conversion is something, a metric that you manage. And, somebody comes and says, okay, boss, company is doing something else. We need to move this metric, right? We need to go higher. Now you should be aware, okay, what can you do in your product to move this metric, right? Can you remove this button? Can you remove this page? Can you do something else in the product, right? To move this metric. Now, it may or may not be the right thing to do, but you have to know to be able to make those choices, to push back when it's not the wrong thing to do, right? Or if you don't believe in it. But how to move a certain metric? What can you do in the move product to move certain metric, right? Is like sometimes you have to do that. You have to first, okay, say, okay, I want to, typically you will make a change in the product and measure the metric. Now, you will also get into situations where you have to first say, okay, we have to move the metric. So figure out what you should do, right? I think that's a very, at least in my observation, my career, been into the situation all the time, right? And saying, okay, we are not meeting the numbers, we're not meeting the goals. Can you move this metric for last 1 month or 6 months or whatever, right? So how those interplays with your product capabilities and what can you do, what levers do you have to move those metrics is a good skill to have. Again, it will, this will what can, pull you up, right? And make you a good strong PM, right? So having that understanding and keeping it handy with you is good, right? The last part I want to talk about, I'm going to take is problem solve metrics movements. Well, what does problem solve metric movement is, right? This is kind of related to what I was saying last time, is that certain metrics moves, right? You are doing a regular monitoring of your metrics, and let's say your sign up rate drops or your conversion rate drops suddenly, right? Or let's say take an example of YouTube, right? Your watch minutes drop. Total number of minutes that are being watched by all the users dropped, let's say for a few days or for a week. Now, inevitably in such cases, PM will be asked to say, okay, tell us what's going on. Why is this moving, right? And it's again a tough skill to, in many cases, there will be data and analytics team, but as a PM, you have to be able to interpret that data, right? You can, it could be, for example, like let's take the case of YouTube, right? Total watch minutes dropped, right? You have to look at both internal, right? Did we launch something, right? Did some other team launch something that changed, that may have had an impact? Is there a product launch that your team did that may have had an impact? It could be that, okay, there was a India-Pakistan match as of today, and people are watching that and nobody is watching YouTube, right? Or fewer users, right? Now that could have had an impact, for example, right? So external factors, internal factors, what launched. Then again, we talked about interplay of various metrics, right? So applying those skills to problem solve, and then in case if you have to stabilize, you have to roll back something, to be able to recommend that, right, with data, with justification, right, visually, like in my roles, I've usually spent a lot of time on this, right? So I think this is, I felt like and again, it's more by observation, by learning, by asking questions, that that you can build this skill, or this practice, this competency, right? So being able to problem solve like a certain metrics movement, and in some cases you may not know, but I think you have to go deeper into it. So having some of those skills I talked about, right, to go deeper into one level of metrics, to understand the interplay of metrics, to understand what is happening outside, look at all those factors to be able to help problem solve why certain things are moving a certain way, and then if you have to do something about it, right, take corrective action. Correct. So I think this is kind of the metrics and data, an important skill in today's world. Okay, the next one I want to cover is more around strategic thinking. Actually, if you look at most of the PM's feedback, that when we do the reviews and PMs, this will be the common gap, right? Is that they're not strategically thinking, and most common times, and it's pretty obvious what strategic thinking is, but you get most PMs, the pitfall is they get involved in the day-to-day things, right? There's always more things that you can do, right, than you have time for in a day. So most PMs are typically just heads down, looking at their product and saying, okay, I need to build this. This is a problem, So I think this, so that's kind of a pitfall in some ways, right? That you get too much bogged down by the details, and you're not looking at the strategic part of the product, right? So I think you have to always make time and make effort to kind of don't when addition to the day-to-day things which you need to do anyway, is that you're thinking about overall strategy and strategic thinking, right? I've kept very simple thing. Strategic thinking is a whole topic and discussion in itself. So I probably gonna just avoid that for today too much. But there's things like big picture view, right? Not just your product or your capability or your function, but overall offering of the company. What are the other things? What is happening? And kind of giving that, right, versus the narrow small thing that you individually are working on, right? Again, market industry view is outside in perspective. I think we looked at it, kind of covered it slightly in in the previous topics. But having a market industry view, what is happening, presenting that view, how you're like one of the things I used to do is in my product review sessions is, once in a while we'll have an outside in perspective, right? What is a competitor view? What is competition doing? How does our product stack up to competition, right? So I think these are the things that, while you may or may not do something about it, but having that view and that perspective is and that information is good, because that does influence your decisions and your standing in the in the company. How to make the product win, right? I think that's the one thing I always ask my PM: how going to make your product win? Now it may not be winning right now, but how can you make your product win? So having that view, like over 3 to 5 years, 2 years, 5 years, like over longer time, right, versus let's say 3 to 6 months, right? So having that view on what as a company, as an organization, what you need to do, right? And I used to always tell my PMs to always make case for it, right? And you may or may not do it, right? And as a company, we make certain decisions, and as leadership, companies and leaders may make certain decisions, right? But as a PM, you always need to make a case, right? That how can you win? And these are things we should do. And I think all of these is what will help you get over that gap which I see in a lot of PMs and, typically in the reviews is the, strategic thinking missing, right? And they're too kind of bogged down into, the day-to-day, working of the, of what you work on. Okay. I think this is another kind of favorite topic or interesting topic for me is trade-off and prioritize and being able to make tough calls, right? Again, we covered this, and again, I feel like this is why I wanted to focus on this is what determines a good PM versus an average PM, right? Is their ability and their skill to be able to do trade-offs and prioritize, and it will happen all throughout the product life cycle, right? And again, the environment, the working, most companies, you have constraints, you have limits on resources, and what that means is you have to make compromises, right? You have to make trade-offs. It could be in terms of what to do, or it could be what to do later, or it could be like, okay, let's do this, but do it in a smaller fashion, or do it with less features, right? So this is like so to have that mental view of, let's say you want to build 5 things or 100, let's say 10 things, and what is really critical, what is really important, you want everything, of course, everybody wants everything, but that's not going to happen. So how will you make those choices? Now, if you have a very clear, crisp framework to make that decision, you have to be very clear in your mind, okay, this is something that we definitely should build, and this is like we will push for building it, but may or may not happen, right? So I think being able to make that, I think most PMs struggle with this, especially early in the career. I mean, they don't know how to make that decision, right? Because but I think by observation, by giving it some critical thought, focus on this and build this kind of a mindset that yes, you will have to make trade-offs, you'll have to make hard decisions, right? And because this is not black and white, right? I mean, it's not easy to make decisions in most of these cases, right? So I think value of a feature is not easy to kind of articulate, right? Cost and impact, maybe yes, right? So like, does it really going to move my metrics? So having that very clear metrics, North Star metric, and what metric you're trying to move, correct? For everything you want to build is very important. It is why you are building this, right? So remember, in the previous things we talked about why. So having that why, meaning you're building this because I expect the conversion rate to move up, move by 100 bips, right? I think having those clear articulation wherever possible is very useful, right? Because then you're able to justify this and say, okay, I'm going to do this, right, and not do this. And so I think that, and the cost. And costing, I want to talk about one thing. So, typically a costing, let's say it's the cost is only the engineering resources, right, that I needed to build this. And typically that costing and estimation will be done by engineering team. But having some kind of a rough intuition on what it will take to build this is a good skill, because then even before you are spending effort in doing the detailed estimation, right, you are able to at least have a rough idea in your mind, and you're able to make some of those choices upfront will help you, right? So while the accurate or the detailed estimations are done by the teams who do the work, having a good view of, okay, if I build this capability, it might take me like a week or a month or 6 months or a year, right? Kind of that window will help you see whether it's really worth getting deeper into or not, right? So I think that part is also a good skill and a good kind of competency to build on. But I feel like this is again very, very hard thing to learn and build. But yeah, right level of scope. I think this is again a lot of PMs I've seen struggle with right level of scope. It's very easy to build like infinite scope, right? I mean, large scope things, right? And that's the easiest thing as a PM, because you're building everything into that feature. but really having a critical thought on, okay, is that like, do I need to build all of this? What is the right level of scope that I need, right? And because always think there is an opportunity cost, right? Even if you have resources, you could have been doing something else, right? And which is more value creative, right? Or additive. So I think as a PM to be able to analyze a feature, a particular capability, and see what is the right level of scope, right, and what is extra or not needed is and you'll hear things like MVP and all of that. I think most people struggle with that, right? So I think it's very important to again have a critical thought around it, have a reasoning around why you think this is important and this is not important, right? And practice and talk to people and observe from people who do it better, right? And that's how I have learned, is to kind of observation and talking to people who do it better than me, right? So I think that's no book or class will teach you that, unfortunately, right? So that's only, I feel like some of those skills can only be achieved in in a real life situation versus theoretical books or case studies that you'll do, right? Um, the other challenge PM faces is you will always have a lot of inputs, right? And how to balance those inputs, right? There will be sales, there will be engineering, there will be other product teams, right? There will be customers who want and different things, and again, you cannot do everything. So how do you take those inputs? Sometimes you may get contradictory inputs, right? Customers are asking for something, sales is asking for something totally opposite, right? And usually not the case, but they can be contradictory or not exactly aligned. Now, to be able to take those various inputs and figure out what to do, right? Balance those multiple disparate inputs, for each one of those stakeholders or entities, what they are saying is most important, right? In their perspective, whatever they want or they need is the most important thing, right? And everybody will think like that. And now to take that input, right, process that, and still respond and being able to take action on it is again a complex skill, but please observe and focus and try to learn how to do that, right? Is a good practical thing that you will see. In a kind of a subset of that is internal versus external stakeholders, right? So you may have sales, now you may have customers, now you may have engineering, design, like there will be a lot of different opinions or inputs coming to you, right, from internal versus external, and how do you deal with them effectively, right? Is again a complex interpersonal skill that you need to build, right? So PM skills are always about this interpersonal skill as well as like core competency skills, right? So I feel like some of these are, how do you manage some of those expectations and respond to that in a professional and reasonable fashion, right? Is important. So yeah, I think just to kind of summarize, being able to trade off and prioritize and choose. And a couple of things, right? One is to have very clear thought process. Why are you making those choices? And second thing is being able to articulate and convince others that those choices are the right choices, right? Is kind of the key to success in this. Okay, just give me one sec. Oh. I call this section like communication and storytelling, right? And why am I saying storytelling, right? I mean, okay, it's because each product is a story. If you want to communicate something, you have to tell a story around it, right? You can't, you cannot. So there is a famous thing I use. I probably didn't put it on the slide, but like, like 80% of people will believe if you say something with data, right? And if you observe that 80% is made up, right? So how do you communicate that? Some of those messaging is very important as a PM, right? So I'll go over some of those examples and things that you can do to be good at it, right? So first thing is to be able to explain your product strategy and vision, right? Why are you building certain things? Why is this important to build? You should always have it ready, right? And like, it's like an elevator pitch, and many of those things you'll see is that, at the drop of a hat, you should be able to explain and say, okay, stand up and say, okay, this is why we need to build this, right? And for that, you have to be clear in your mind. And then only you can, tell that story and tell that communication and all of that, right? So I always tell PMs that, you should do it every month, right? To do a different set of person, right? And redo it and redo it, and you get better at it, right? So this is just practice and being able to explain your product strategy and vision. Typically, you'll have to do it to your leaders. Typically, you'll have to do it to your stakeholders, to your engineering team, to other teams, right? So get like practice this and become very good at this, right? So this is like, this can be done easily, right? It's just practice. The second thing is explain trade-offs, correct? So I think we did talk about it on the previous kind of section, is being able, so you'll have to make trade-offs, right? That's a given, correct? So you will always make trade-offs. Now you'll be asked to justify. So let's say I am like a team B, and I asked you to do two things, and you come back and say, I can only do one. Easy one to say, oh, because I don't have enough resources. No, I think that's just my standard answer is, it's not a resource problem, it's a prioritization problem, right? So you have to prioritize, and it's okay to prioritize, but justify why you picked one over the other, and or not picked one, correct? So okay, this I don't think this will give enough impact, let's say, or why, this is why I think so, right? So being able to explain the trade-offs is critical, right? Because otherwise you'll get always bogged down, right? By things that you don't want to do or you should not be doing, right? So explain trade-offs, justify trade-offs, justify your decisions, right? Is a good. Again, for that you need clarity of thought in your own mind. Then only you can do it to others. Convince stakeholders, right? Again, it could be justification of what you are doing, what you're not doing, or going to another team and saying why they should do two of two, right? So the other side of that example that I was giving, now you need to be able to justify to the other teams why you need these things done, why this is important, why, what will happen if you don't do this, right? So I think being able to, with data, with logic, with reasoning, justify and explain some of those decisions, some of those asks, some of the things you are doing, not doing, is very important. I didn't put a thing there, but I think some of it is also, if you work with a team on a regular basis, right, some other teams, building that trust is very important, that what you're saying comes with logic and reasoning and thought, and not like randomly because somebody told you to do so, right? So if you build that trust with other teams and build that thing, that will help you in convincing on an ongoing basis. Or it works both ways, right? So sometimes you may get your way, sometimes you may not get your way, and that's okay, right? And not all decisions will be what you want, but being able to convince and give a reasonable logic for what you need and what you want to do is will help you build your own credibility, will help you build that kind of trust, and those things. So I think that's kind of that. The written and oral comms, right? I think this is again core skill. You have to be very good at both written as well as oral, right? So you have to be able to make a oral argument, or make a presentation, or write a very good document. convey what you want to convey, right? So being able to, and when I say, like, it's not about building a nice looking presentation, right? It's about being able to convince, give the message, right? And again, there are enough material online and classes that you can take on how to be good at doing that, right? I think so. As a PM, do focus on this skill, and if you have gaps there, I think please focus and build that skill, right? Some people it comes naturally. Like, for example, to me, it did not come naturally, right? I had to focus on this skill. So if you look at all the competencies in any function, some of these will come naturally to you, and some of them you have to put in effort, right, and be conscious about it. And again, I'll go a little bit of a gyan, but I think to be aware of where you are good at and where you need to focus is very important. And this goes with any job or any responsibility that you may have. Be very clear. Okay, these are the 5 things I need to be good at to be successful in this. I'm good at 3 of those things, right? So, but I'm not good at 2 things. So can I get to that level, right? So it's like, you're taking 5 subjects in a class, in school. Now 3, that you can get an 8, right? I mean, you're good at it, you're solid and this thing, but 3 of them you're getting a D. Can you get to a C or a B, right? Is the question. And you're going to focus more on that, right? So working at professional life is very similar to that, right? So you're going to have things that you are weak at. First thing is be aware, be very aware where you are strong and weak, right? And where you are weak, you focus and take help and get better at it. So overarching kind of a little bit of speech from my side, but I think be aware of where your strong is, where you feel like you need to improve, take inputs from others, and focus and take conscious actions to get better at it, right? So, and then you can get better at it, right? It's not rocket science. Okay, I think we're coming towards the end. I know we had a lot of time, but I think we went through it pretty fast. But let me cover some tips, right? Like, these are overarching tips. I think some of these we covered, but I feel like beyond just that, right? That will help you be successful. So one thing is, learn to write documents. I think that's, I always feel like people focus a lot on presentations, but I think, like, for example, Amazon has this thing, right, where you always write documents, you don't make presentations, right? So I think, and why I'm saying documents is because you tell a narrative, you tell a story. And sometimes I've always tell my PMs to write documents even if nobody is going to read it, right? Or 2 people are going to read it, because it helps you get your mind, your clarity of thought, right? When you're writing a narrative versus just writing bullet points, right? So learn to write documents and write documents, right? It's very, very important. Write 2 pages, right? For IRTL features. Before you even go anything, write a 2-pager, then you can make a deck or a case if you wanted to present something. But do write documents, because you're telling a narrative, you're telling a story there, right? And not just making few bullet points. So I think it will help you clarify that in your own mind, what you want to build, why you want to build. So try to justify that, right, in a document, and that will help. And again, even if nobody wants to read it, do write them. Second thing is more a tactical thing, is to being able to make quick presentations, right? I mean, I usually like tell PMs to have like some of the core material always there, and then you can put together a presentation in an hour, right? And many cases you will have to do very quickly presentation, right? I mean, you're not going to get a week or 2 weeks, right? You say, okay, go present something, tomorrow. You should be able to pull it together, right? So again, this is a learned skill. I didn't have it. I probably don't have it still. I'm not very good at it. But I know people who are very good at it, right? So I think this is again a tip, right? That try to do that, right? Talk to customers. Okay, please, again, I think I mentioned this in the prior section as well. Talk to customers, and you'll get a very, very different perspective. Sometimes it's hard. You don't have access to customers and examples, but wherever possible, push for it really hard to get that information unfiltered, right? You will learn. I mean, every time I talk to a customer, I learn something new about. Sometimes I learn about products, like features even I don't know about, because they are using it in a different way than we intended it, right? Because they don't know what we intended, right? They see it and they use it. So talk to customers, you'll get a very different perspective, right? And it doesn't mean that whatever they ask, say you build it into the product, but you'll get a perspective that will help you build your own theories and all opinions on what we should build, right? So if everything else well, a better PM will always have more information from customers, right? So do talk to customers. Think about customers, right? You are the voice of the customer, so always kind of use that as a lever, and talk to customers whenever you can. Key metrics on fingertips, guys. So this is like, again, learned skill. Keep the key metrics, like you should be able to, like, without thinking, looking at it up, you should know and like, call it out in any discussion, right? You don't have to look it up. Like, the key metrics for your product, for your area, should be on your fingertips. You don't need to look it up, right? You look it up offline every week, every day, whatever makes sense, but always have on your fingertips, right? How many MAU, DAU are there? What is the conversion rate, right? Now, it doesn't need to be exact, but you need to be aware of where you are and how things are moving, right? So keep the key metrics always on your fingertips, right? And it will help you when you are doing justification, when you're doing some of those discussions with people, right? Why we should do some things, not things. Having those key metrics on fingertips without having to look it up, will be a key, can help you. So just do that. I think it's been my experience. Extract and analyze data about your product. I think I'm just probably a repetition, but there might be dedicated data analytics, data teams who do all of that. But try to do it yourself. I think it will help you, because you'll be able to do more beyond just the standard what everybody else has, right? So standard reports everybody will have, but can you do more, right? Can you go deeper? Can you go some other angle, right? So learn to play with data. And just get comfortable with data, right? Is kind of spend time on it and get better at it, right? A lot of times it's just a mental barrier. It's not really that difficult. It's that sometimes we feel like, okay, we don't have that skill, so we should not do it, right? So I think just get a little bit better at it. Last topic is probably controversial, but I think you should be able to make quick mocks by yourself, right? As a PM, right? You don't have to make the actual mocks that you're building it, but when you're adding product spec, when you're trying to explain something, when you're trying to even brainstorm, being able to quickly mock, sometimes it's easier to visually communicate what you're thinking about, right? Versus trying to write it in words, right? So being able to quickly create a rough mock, right? And show it to make your case or explain something will help you in your PM journey, right? So I think that's kind of some people don't think it's right. I feel like that's important, kind of a good skill to have. So yeah, but I feel like these skills will help you grow and build a successful career. So I think I'll stop there, Arlene. I know we are a little bit, quite a bit early, but probably went faster than I thought I would. But
that's all right. That's no issues. We do have some questions in the question and answers box.
Okay, so I'll just stop sharing.
All right.
Okay, so they just take it in the order they are there, Arlene?
Yeah.
Okay. The first question is, does PM role involve marketing too, or they both are mutually exclusive roles? So I think where I have seen that the roles overlap is typically in a B2B or a SaaS kind of a product, right? And many companies used to have, they still have this function called product marketing, right? So I think the cases where there is a product marketing role and a product management role, right? So product marketing does the go-to-market and talking to customers, right? Many companies are moving towards unified roles where there is no dedicated product marketing role, and product management includes product marketing as well, right? So that is like one case that I have seen where marketing and this thing overlaps. Of course, marketing. The pure marketing team will be a stakeholder for as a PM, correct? So that is there. Of course, there is one more case of when you're building a marketing product, right? And I've been involved in that, and where you're actually building a product that will help the marketeers in your team, right? And you have some solution for them, and of course then are some of your stakeholders. So but typically, like, marketing would be a stakeholder. There is, of course, product marketing, which is kind of an overlapping role, most common in B2B kind of companies. Okay. So difference between customer segments, what is the question is, what is the key difference between customer segmentation and user personas? So customer segment is basically trying to figure out what is the customers, right? And what set of customers will you target with this capability that you're trying to build out with your product. So for example, a customer segment could be, urban males in India, right? Which are in tier 1 cities, let's say urban centers, in the age of 25 to 40, right? That could be a customer segment. Correct. So typically you'll take the whole customer base and then try to segment in which you can target, and you may target multiple customer segments as well, right? Just not just one, but you can have multiple customer segments that you want to target. User persona is a way to identify certain customer segments and use that as a lever, right? Or use that as an explaining point to your teams, right? I think that's the way I kind of think about it. So user persona could be, you pick a user Rahul, right? You give them a name, you say, give them an age, give them certain characteristics, and try to see what are their needs. And it's a way to explain your product capabilities or what you want to build or the customer needs, right? So persona is more like a tool or a mechanism that you use to explain the user needs and the things that you're trying to address. Do we need to do customer interviews to prioritize the features, or as a PM, is there another way of prioritizing the features? I feel like the customer interviews are always happening. I mean, I feel like these two things are a very iterative thing, right? So in today's world, you're not building like a roadmap for 2 years and never prioritizing again, right? You're always doing it, right, in every quarter, right? Typically, hopefully every, so I think one of the things now is, it's very iterative now, right? So you're not, I don't know if one or the it should come by the other. I think it should always be happening. So, whenever you get a chance to interview or talk to customers, you should. But I don't think that only the customer input should go into prioritizing. I think that should be one of the inputs. I think you should have your own intuition on what is working, what is not working, what can work, and use that. And many companies or groups have created frameworks for prioritizing, right? They give certain points or certain weightage to impact and customer ask, or different kind of levers, right? And then create a score or some framework. You can create a framework, and it's good to have that some kind of a logic, right, to explain why you're doing certain things and why this is more important or higher priority, right? So that's how I would look at it. I would try to not, in my opinion, just like, only the customer needs is very important. Now, there could be cases where, all of your customers are asking for certain thing, then of course that becomes very important, right? But I think that should be used as one input, not the only input to deciding the prioritization. How would I know when to push back or accept a feature request? I think it's like, as I said, there's a little bit of intuition there, a little bit of the framework, right, on how you decide a certain feature, right? You can't ad hocly like say, okay, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do this, right? It's not like that. You have to have certain intuition, certain logic on why we want to do X things, right? And it has to align to whatever metrics you're trying to move, right? If that feature is not moving that metric, right, or a set of metrics that you really, that's your goal to move, then that's a reason enough to move, right? Because saying it doesn't have the impact on those metrics. So that's why having the clear articulation of metrics that you're trying to move and correlating the features, right, to those metrics, right? And then it's an easy decision on when to push back, not push back, right? Counter metrics, I think, okay, let's take an e-commerce, right, as an example. So the question is, can you please elaborate on counter metrics with an example? So let's take an example of e-commerce that I'm very aware with. So it could be that your North Star metric is number of orders, right? So you're trying to get to, increase your number of orders or conversion rate, right? And you basically build a lot of features and say, I'm going to move the number of orders. A counter metric could be your return rate, right? So now if you get a lot of orders, but your number of returns is also very high, then actually it is not doing well for the business, right? Because the counter metric is also going high. Now counter metric needs to remain fixed. So it's you could do a lot of things to move the number of orders, correct? The number of incoming orders. But if your returns is also going high, then actually it is useless, right? Moving that metric, North Star metric, has no meaning, correct? Because it is getting, your return rate is high, so it doesn't matter, right? Because people are buying things but putting return, because that means you're getting the wrong set of users, or the wrong things you are selling, trying to promote, which are getting, people are putting the orders, but then they are getting and returning it, right? So that would be another example of counter metric, right? So let's say your North Star metric is orders, your counter metric could be returns, right? So that would be a simplistic example, right, of counter metrics. North Star metric, is it something that we need to agree on before we start execution? Yes. Before you even decide to do anything, North Star, because you build your product based on North Star metric, right? The features that you select are being decided to move the North Star metric, to improve on the North Star metric. If you are not clear what the North Star metric is, you should stop working on it. And you're doing something wrong, basically, right? If you don't have the clear metric. Counter metric, I think we talked about. Again, there are some, if you do online search, you'll find some good material, and I'm sure IPL will also have good kind of things on those. If you do any of the classes, I'm sure. Many startups in India focus mainly on acquiring customers first and making profits later. Companies like Zomato, Paytm are still not making profits. Using metrics, do they understand when and how their business will be profitable? I cannot say for them, but yes, I'm sure they have a business plan in place, is how to, and typically it's more about, see, their initial goal as a PM may be customer acquisition, right? So there could be two kinds of goals, right? One is customer acquisitions, number of transactions, right? So you're trying to optimize for that. Now, as you move towards a different life cycle of the company, you may say, now my counter metric is, okay, what is my margins on those, right? And you try to improve the margins versus keeping that stable, right? So I think some of the things we talked about is how metrics play with each other is good to understand. And that's kind of a good way of thinking about how metrics interplay with each other, right? So you could have a customer sign up acquisition target. You could have number of transactions target. You could have margins target, right? Now when the margins are, let's say your goal also becomes margin, right? Now you may try to say, okay, I'm not going to get a customer who's not going to transact, or I will not focus on transactions which are not profitable, right? So you may tweak your product to more focus on transactions which give you a higher margin, right? So that's how those metrics interplay, and it may have an impact on your product thinking and your product features. Usually product manager reports to whom? I think every org, I don't know, report to other product managers, they report to CEO, they report to business heads. Every organization has its own org structure, right? But typically, if you're PM reporting, to a very, not at a very senior level, at a very junior level to an engineering person, I think it's the wrong setup, right? I think you should avoid it. My personal suggestion. But yeah, because then you're not making the right choices. I think having that friction between product and engineering and being able to make independent thoughts is very important. If as a PM you are being asked to report to a project manager or engineering manager at a very lower level, then probably not the right setup, in my opinion. How do you see budgeting for a project at very start of project or SOW by PM? I don't know. I don't have very specific thoughts on this. So sorry, I'm going to skip that. What is the role of use cases in PM? Okay, see, use cases is a way of expressing the customer needs, right? So when you're writing product specs and you're explaining what we need to build, it's a way of, it's a tool or a mechanism to explain what you want to build or why you want to build, right? Because that's a use case, or from a user perspective, right? What is the thing that you want to solve, right? Or what they will behave. So it's I think it's a mechanism to decide what you should build. Product owner, difference between product owner and product manager, I don't know. I don't believe in product owners. I don't know what people have come up with nowadays. I think to me, they are the same. Either you manage a product, run a product, own a product, or you don't, right? So I think this is just nomenclatures that you think. Just have to watch out for that product. You're not becoming a schedule runner, right? If you're just managing schedules, then you're not doing product manager, and look for something different. A product manager should not be responsible for schedules, right? So just it's a common mistake I see across different companies, right? Need to be an MBA background. That seems to be a common way. I personally don't have an MBA, and I have been a senior product leader role. But I think, like, if you look at some of the top companies where they hire product managers from, right, they do hire from business schools, right? So I think that's kind of common. I don't know if it is a need, but that's kind of a lot of times it's the way to kind of break into that, right, is having an MBA. Next question. When I'm trying to face estimation or analytical questions, I get overwhelmed and confused with those. How should I prepare for the interview for these rounds with confidence and facts ready to have a good conversation? I don't know, actually. Sorry. I don't know how to prepare for it. I guess there are services. I mean, practice. I think there are online resources. There are services where you can do practice, mock interviews and practice that. Some of it is just confidence, and some of it is just, having some logical thought around it. I don't have anything more value add to tell you. Sorry. How to convince stakeholder benefit of building a product have less cost benefit in present, but more profit in future? I mean, with data, right? I mean, you have to show why it can be good long-term and why building long-term is important, right? I think it's just storytelling and that. And some of it may not be relevant, right? Maybe the company, or in that case, so you have to see how that is aligned to the overall business goals. If your business goals is that you need to make profit in short term, then giving a long-term view is not relevant, right? Because it's not aligned to the business goals. So first thing is you have to align to the business goals, right? And if you're not aligned to the business goals, you're doing something wrong, right? So align to business goals. Second thing is, and then make a case with data. Show other products that have gone similarly, right? And or different industries, similar industries, right? So I think making a case is important, but it has to align to business goals. If it's not aligned to business goals, then all logic is irrelevant. What are 1-2 goods for product managers? I actually don't know. I've never read any books on product management. All my experience is actually just learning on the job. I've never read any books on product management. I don't know if that's the answer you wanted, but could you please suggest how do we transition from BA to PM role? What one should consciously do to prepare oneself better for the role? I think that was my presentation on how can you be good at PM. I thought that was what I tried to cover in the presentation. In terms of breaking in from a BA to a PM, I don't know what it takes. Probably it's more about getting that opportunity, right, and grasping all of that opportunity versus like preparing for the interviews. Then again, I don't know personally. But yeah, I think I hope those skills that I talked about, right, is what you build on. Book, podcast, document that you can suggest that can help me brush up my PM knowledge. Actually, I mean, I do read some blogs and things. I talk to people, but maybe I'll look up. I mean, I don't have it on top of my hand or top of my head on books I read.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think I can answer that question by saying IPL is a great forum to read our blogs as well as our newsletter on LinkedIn. So yeah, sorry, you can continue this.
Yeah, no, I think I mean, I do read once in a while. I don't know if like there are a couple of books like I found very interesting, but I don't know if they're focused on PM skills. I think they're more about building good products.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the books that podcast I read is how do you think about building a good product versus like how do you try to become. That's why I did this presentation, because I think a lot of the books focus on how to build a good product, right? But I wanted to talk about things that from my experience, right, where people succeed as a PM and what kind of skills and competencies you can focus to be a good PM. Do you think senior project manager should go through an APM role to transition into product management, or how do you get the skills? So I don't know what APM role is. I think different companies have a different concept. In Google and Flipkart, APM role is very different. We hire actually college graduates and give them a 2-year kind of on the job training, right, and they become like entry level MBAs, right, PMs. But I think APM might be a junior PM role in this context, and I think that's fine, right? I mean, I think this is more a career choice versus a PM skill on what makes sense for you. I just give some overarching career advice, right? I think and again, don't think of your career as a linear progression, right? That you have to go from A to A+1 to A+2 plus A+3, right? I think sometimes you take dips, sometimes you take step backs, and if that means that you have to take a step back to transition into into an APM, which is a junior role probably, but it'll help you grow in longer term, then yes, right? I mean, if that's what you want to do, then maybe do it, right? But I don't know in your specific case. Sorry, I can't say whether it makes sense or not, right? I think that's your call. What would be the minimum years of experience to aim for a product manager role? I mean, I don't know if there is one. I think like from a lot of people I see is that, especially if you want to work in some of the top companies, I think the question was there earlier is that I think a good way could be to do an MBA, right? Is a lot of people like people do like after working, right? They do an MBA and then use, post that, get into product management. There could be other courses like IPL and other courses which can help you grow into that role. I think I don't know if there's a minimum experience level needed. I don't know. There is like, I think it depends on the case by case on what makes sense for you and your thing and what kind of product companies you want to target for, right? But I mean, look at like, if you think that's worthwhile to invest in an MBA and it makes sense, then, an MBA from like ISBs, there are a lot of people from ISB get into product management, right? I mean, that's a good example. IPL is a good example of being able to do it easily. So I think make a call on those and see if that makes sense for you to transition into product management. So actually, I'm not a very good person of the career breaks. I think a lot of questions around on career transitions and career breaks. I think IPL, I saw there were a couple of other sessions and classes they have on those specific topics. So I would suggest maybe Harleen, can you talk about it? Like, because there are a lot of questions around transitioning into product management, and maybe you have some other sources, the resources that people can target for that.
Yes, we have in the past and keep hosting sessions on how to transition from any role into PM roles. We recently had one last month too. So I would suggest all the audience members to, keep up to date with our events, because we also have some career workshops like cracking interviews and how to present yourself in interviews. We have a lot of sessions like that. So I guess the suggestion to the audience would be to keep an eye on our upcoming events. To a lot of these things we have done in the past and continue to do. So
Thanks.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm both interested in both product management and product design. From a career point of view, which has more scope? I think both have their own scopes. I think you have to know what you like. Designers have a very different skill set and very different thought process, right? Much more creative. I work with a lot of designers, very good designers. They're much more creative, much more like, I think PMs are more structured in like how they do things. I think design is more like, okay, there's very unstructured thoughts and they try to kind of abstract it into design, right? Very, very customer focused and creative. So I think it depends on what you like, and what you enjoy doing. And I think both have good scopes, right? And I think generative AI will only, those will be tools that will help you, right? I don't think it has an impact on which has a longer career, right? I think they will help tools to do some of those things, right, that we do manually can be automated, right? That's how I kind of think about it. Again, there's a question about career transition, which I'll refer to Harleen. But I think there is a sub question there. Is it needed to know coding stuff about UI UX? No, I think it's good to know about UI UX, right? I think principles of, again, you don't need to know coding. You need to know a little bit of what will happen is, if you want to be successful, you'll have to understand example, right? That how long will this feature take? And if you need to be able to have a conversation with engineering partners to see what they're saying and what it makes sense, right? So you really need to know coding. You need to be able to parse and interpret that information, right? So you'll have to get a little bit understanding of it. You don't need to be expert at it. UI UX is much more relevant, right? I think that's to understand how customers interact with your product, what makes sense, what is inefficient, what is how to build a good looking product, right? I mean, UI UX becomes very important in terms of efficiency and usage and how customers see it, right? So there are people who specialize, let's say a designer or engineer, but as a PM, you need to know, understand to be able to have those discussions, right? So I always say, like, designers will design, but PMs has the last call, right? So you should be able to have that conversation on why we do certain things. So it's not like you have to be an expert, but you need to know enough to have those conversations. Is it difficult to move from sales to product management? So I think what you will find typically is that the easiest way is that within the organization, right? So I'll make an overarching statement on career transition. So in many cases, it's much easier to do within the organization that you are in, right? Because you understand the domain, you understand the customers, you understand the dynamics. Getting into a new organization is a little more difficult, right? Then you need to go through, some kind of a thing which forces you to do that, right? Whether a thing like an IPL or an MBA or some of those, right? To help you kind of jump from X to Y, right? Within the organization, it's usually simpler, right? What I've seen. Do PMs need to be job all the time while other PMs like design can work for fixed hours and switch off from work? What is the reality of PM job in India? I think this depends on the organization, but I mean, as a PM, I may not be working, but I'm thinking about some of these things, right? I think that depends on individuals. Some people switch off, right? And person like me, like even if I'm not working, I don't switch off, right? I'm like, some part of my brain is still thinking about some problem that I'm working on, right? And maybe it is a phase, and maybe sometimes I just ignore it and not do anything. So I think it's more to do with the organization and your way of working. I don't know if it is to do with the PM function so much. How can we improve the skill set for developing a product vision? I think there are some materials online, right? Case studies you can do. Some of it will come practice only, right? There's no other way than to do it in real life. There are case studies, there are courses. I think IPL may offer. Harleen, maybe, I don't know if you have certain things, inputs on these. Like improving, like, do you have courses on improving skill set for product visioning and things like that?
The institute does offer certain courses for specific aspects of PMs to product management, if you want to focus on one aspect of the full skill set. Otherwise, our certification programs delve into all fundamentals to create a overall rounded, well-rounded skill set.
It's a good skill to build. I practice if you want to crack interviews. I mean, this is something, a tip I'll tell you, that because a lot of the interviews focus on product vision, right? They'll give a case study or something like that, right? So I think, like, if you want to, especially if you want to crack interviews and build practice some of that using case studies or doing some of those courses, right? How do you handle technical debt? I mean, like, there are different ways, right? In most cases, what I found efficient was you dedicate certain amount of bandwidth, right? Certain amount of resources to technical debt, right? And versus PM trying to say, okay, we should do 5 of these technical debts or 10 of these technical debts, right? I think to get deeper into is like, it's a black hole, just, rabbit hole. Right? So I think the most efficient way I have found is to dedicate. Now that bandwidth to dedicate can vary on what is the product maturity, what is the need. But in general, like, it just dedicate like X amount of bandwidth, right? That you're going to do technical debt, right? And let the technical teams decide which one of those is critical. Now, there could be cases where some of those things are very, very important and they're impacting your customer experience, right? Then as a PM, you take ownership of that, because then it's not just a technical debt, then it's a customer problem, right? And then you kind of, but those are edge cases, right? In most cases, like, handling is to do the bandwidth. That's what I found most efficient. There are different ways of doing it. How to bridge the product team to market demand as is? I'm sure I don't understand this question. Move on to the next one. If you have more details, if you can just write it in the next question or something, we can take it. Do you see PMs bringing value in typical service-based industry support functions? I don't know the answer. Frankly, I don't understand it, so I don't know the answer. What would you be looking in a candidate if you're hiring a PM? I think I covered some of that. I hope I covered some of the skills and competencies and the drive. I think I look at the thought process, interpersonal skills, and some of those, right? Those are the things I look at, right, when you're hiring a PM, right? How do they think about metrics? How do they think about, customer thought process? Are they just like, are they able to articulate some of those problems, clearly and crisply, right? Those are things I would look at. As a fresher with a technical background who has worked as a developer for a year, I think I'll leave the career transition questions to the answers that I think Harleen was giving. Technical debt we covered. Traditional PM and a technical PM. A technical PM typically will be more into platform kind of products, I would think, or they would more focused on the execution part versus, like, say, the road mapping and the visioning part, right? So there are two kinds of technical PM I have seen. I don't know all the companies or places where they have a technical PM. So I know some companies have a PM and a technical PM, right? So a PM is more market facing and visioning and metrics, those stuff, and a technical PM is more taking that, doing the detailed product specs. They don't do high level specs, they do detailed specs and more focus on the execution. So they split the responsibilities in some ways, right? So yeah, I think that's what I have seen. In some cases, like the other cases I've seen, technical PM is, let's say, when you're building a platform, let's say a data platform or a compute platform or like a cloud platform, right? Which is more to be used by other engineers, then versus, let's say, with the end users, right? So that's kind of the thing. Can you please quote an example of an escalation building a product that you have managed, and how did you do it? Okay, I don't understand that question. So there's a lot of questions, so I'm moving on wherever I think I can add value. 20 years experience in CIO, working on all enterprise support functions, attempt to go into pure product companies. Any top 3 things you suggest for senior professionals like me? I think, again, I would say that use like to do this kind of career shift is you have to use some forcing function to shift, right? Either you do it within your organization, which is usually the one with the less friction, or you have to use something like a college, education or this thing to switch, right? Otherwise, at senior levels, it's a very difficult transition, I would say, otherwise, right? Unless you use the forcing function. How and when a PM UX collaborations happens in all the time. I mean, I think they are like hip to hip, right? So it should not happen. If it's happening only at certain times, you're doing something wrong. It should be happening all the time. Can you show some light on culture being followed at estimate organization? Like Indian companies, there are full of chaos around. I don't know. I don't understand the question. Esteemed, okay.
Actually, there was a correction. This is from one of our LinkedIn speakers. Instead of estimate, they meant esteemed.
Okay. I don't know. I think this is a chaos is I think as PMs you have to be used to chaos. I think I'll probably not answer the question directly, but I'll indirectly. I think most companies, right, growth companies will be chaos, right? I don't think people like. I think in software development we try to minimize the chaos. I think my personal philosophy is you have to learn to live with the chaos rather than try to minimize it. I don't think you can minimize the chaos. Chaos will always be there. Now, the people who succeed are able to make structure out of chaos and solve for the problems and ignore the noise, right, in some ways. So I think that's how I would look at it. Most companies have some, and I've worked in a lot of companies, most companies have chaos in one way or the other. The question is, how do you survive and succeed in chaos? I think that's the way to more think about the problem versus saying, can I find a place without chaos? No. I think then you're looking for something that doesn't exist, right? And if you want to grow, succeed in chaos is where, and then that's how you'll succeed, because there is a lot of chaos. Everybody's jumping around. Can you make a structure out of it? Can you solve the problems and move ahead? And that's how you will succeed. So I would rather say, rather than avoid the chaos, try to, manage the chaos is the way to success. Aline, I think I probably covered all the questions in the Q&A.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. That's great. To just the thing you asked me some time ago, we have digital e-learning courses that focus on specific, aspects of product management, like product management fundamentals, negotiation and conflict management, presentation and art of storytelling, and more. So if anyone here is looking to, build on a specific skill aspect that will contribute in your product management journey, the link for the courses is in the URL. The URL is in the chat, so you can go through those courses, and if you find anything interesting, you can register for the same. Just a second. Okay. I want to thank you for being here, Arun, and sharing your insights. This was a great session, and you answering all the questions. I'm sure everyone's gotten a lot to take away from this session.